Why do some people have no capacity for spiritual experience? Question mark. I've been reading around on the r/debate religion sub, and have seen so many accounts of people having no contact whatsoever with the presence of God, spiritual beings, subtle energies, etc. Even Christians who have practiced traditionally most of their life and became atheists because, in their terms, never once did God present himself. Now I'm not Christian myself, but I did go to a Catholic school when I was younger, and when they had monthly school mass, I can say with confidence that I did feel the presence of the Christian God in that moment on multiple occasions. So I guess I'm wondering if you have any input on why some people have more of a capacity for spiritual experience than others. Are some people just doubtful without realizing it, thus closing themselves off? Is it due to upbringing? What kind of environmental or internal attributes do you think are most important to become sensitive to subtle phenomena?
I think we all have the capacity to have spiritual experiences. However, most of us are conditioned since birth to believe that we are our bodies and we are our minds. Very few of us grow up in a space where people nurture our soul and remind us of our true nature. Because of this, I believe that many people approach spirituality and religion from an intellectual space. That's why so many religious people are following the rules or preaching the word but fail to practice deepening their connection with God. I know many people who appear to pray with their mind and not with their soul. Or people who understand the theory, but haven't had the direct experience. I think so much of it comes down to how we identify. Do you identify as a name, gender, occupation, thought, body, etc., or do you identify with the spirit that is behind it all? Once we realize our true nature, I believe that we become much more open to having spiritual experiences.
Becoming aware of past lives explains parts of this for you. Forget all the cultural interpretations about past lives and karma and such. Just think about what people learn to do by having a different series of past lives. Some of us hung out with the oracles of ancient Greece. We had a different experience using our clairvoyance and clairsentience than the foot soldiers in the armies of that time. The basic lesson here is spiritual abilities are cumulative across lifetimes. This explains the differences in capacity. As for the effects of the environment and upbringing, consider Michael Jordan. He used to play a little basketball for the Chicago Bulls. He had the support of his mom and dad. He was a weak athlete when he started high school, but very determined and focused. He grew into the wealthiest NBA player of all time, and he's been retired for 2 decades. He's always in the conversation about greatest of all-time basketball players. But what if his dad needed MJ to learn a trade to support the family, and MJ spent all his time outside of school laying bricks? Circumstances can and do dominate people's lives. The same is true for spiritual people. There needs to be permission as we grow up to be spiritual. This doesn't mean religious, just look at the number of ex-Mormons, ex-Baptists, ex-Catholics, etc. Some became atheists and some became some flavor of spiritual. Consider free will. There are constraints placed on us at birth by the family and culture we are born into, but prior to our birth, we can plan any kind of life we desire. Consider this: psychic abilities are held in our chakras. Our DNA has nothing to do with having these abilities. Yet when a child starts showing sensitivity to energy and describes people walking through the kitchen that no one else can see, if a relative was known to also be sensitive, the family might believe that the child inherited this ESP stuff. If the family already tolerated the relative with these traits, they are probably going to accept these traits in their child. This creates permission to be psychic. Isn't it interesting that permission is part of each scenario that I described? Who gave you permission to feel the presence of God? Who removed permission from someone else? These are really good questions. So it's not their doubts or a lack of faith. It could be a lack of permission to be spiritual, and it could even be what they wanted to experience this lifetime. Notice how your choice of questions has a slight tone of judgment, as if they have something wrong with them. It's as if being different from you makes them into a problem. Closing themselves off. Due to upbringing. Without realizing it. Everyone doesn't realize something, lol. Be curious, not judgmental. I know you are being mostly curious in this post. I wanted to point out the word choices for your future benefit.
I believe everyone has the capacity. They just experience it in a different modality. Maybe nobody has taught them how to properly perceive the very subtle nature of divine expression. The most direct form is meditation, and most people go their entire lives without ever closing their eyes in silence and simply taking notice of their inner and outer experience. Some may find it in art, others work. The setting will differ, but the connection is within the moment when presence is at its nearest. God doesn't just present himself, we must use discernment if we want to even have the slightest fragrance of his sovereignty. He makes it difficult to find him on purpose. They shall wander from sea to sea, and from north to east, they shall run to and fro, to seek the word of the Lord, but they shall not find it. This guides us to look within. We will not find it anywhere else.
I believe it's possible that the people you talk of are too deeply involved, or ingrained in ruminating over past events, whether they're good or bad, or making up fantasies in their mind of what is needed for them to be happy in the future. If that's all you do, all day long, and of course, they're not going to feel spiritual, a presence of something good, because they're never paying attention in the moment, the now. There's also tons of disappointment, dread, and even life-destroying depressions caused by petitionary prayer. Praying, asking, demanding that God save you, or someone else from some minor or life-ending crisis. When it really matters, nothing. The causes and conditions that brought about the crisis are ignored, not looked directly at. What good can come of that? It's delusion. Shit happens. My point is, someone stuck in that mode in their life will be in a constant state of fear and stress, and nothing will seem good. Stopping those behaviors, extremely difficult thing to do after decades of practice, is the only way out. I believe I'm rambling now, so I'll end here. The title of your post is very pertinent, I see it every day in many. Great question, I'll go read the rest of the comments now.
Some numerologists have formulas to determine someone's soul number. Each number has a specific purpose in life. Those with younger numbers are less likely to be with God in a devout religious manner, while higher numbers are on a frequency able to closer her the universe/God. The belief is, the higher number their soul is, the closer to ascension/nirvana. Some religions thus rationalize it as part of the soul's journey to sin, or navigate life with a more physical means. In psychology, there is a topic called mental openness. It has many influences, including genetics and how the person was raised, and of course every individual has unique experiences and encounters for reasons beyond our comprehension. I struggle to interact and work with spiritually young folks, especially in interpersonal matters. No matter what age your spirit is, however, there is no room for injustices on moral or political spectrums. God exists in all frequencies, and even puts great fire into those with lower numbers. Paradoxically, these concepts of morals and religion only come from our surroundings/raisings, as I apply from studies a human left alone/untaught will not naturally come to, yet their sixth sense still exists. Shit's crazy. I can go on forever. I'm even thinking of Neanderthals and neurodivergency.
Every person has the potential for spiritual experience, but this potential may remain untapped due to limited beliefs or misplaced focus. Imagine every person as a traveler, seeking new knowledge and experiences. Sometimes, we constrain ourselves by assuming that interesting discoveries and experiences await us only on one path or in one direction. However, in reality, opportunities for growth and understanding may be hidden in the most unexpected places, which we could overlook if we didn't open ourselves to exploring different paths. The same goes for spiritual growth. It can manifest through various life situations and experiences if we are willing to recognize them. Many of us may fail to recognize spiritual phenomena due to biased notions of how they should manifest. Therefore, it's important to be open to new possibilities and redirect our attention to what may lie beyond our expectations, in order to open ourselves to deep spiritual experiences. This is how sensitivity develops. For some, it may be innate.
Based on my own experiences, I believe much of it depends on past lives. I was having spiritual experiences that I remember going back to 4 years old. I vehemently rejected my family's religion of Mormonism and had many experiences before I even considered Christianity. The only reason I considered that religion is because at that time, a lot of people were saying they were having experiences that sounded close to mine. That was in the Jesus freak days in the 70s. I eventually left Christianity and now not in any religion, though I still gravitate towards the Abrahamic thing, interpreting it in my own way. I look at that parable about the rich man and Lazarus in light of reincarnation. Lazarus in his next life was having mystical experiences, but it was impossible to share that with the rich man in his next life. Not that I think the rich man couldn't attain it in that life, but his focus had to change from his own plight to a more inwardly self-examination of how he got there. So it's like that saying, you reap what you sow, and taking the talents and gifts you have and investing in this life by doing compassionate things instead of burying it thinking it could be recovered. Laying up treasure in this life to be collected in the next. It doesn't seem to matter what your religion is now because mystical experiences can be found in all of them except atheism as far as I can tell.
That's a tough one. Christ said they look but they don't see, they hear but don't listen. Some call it selective deafness, but I've noticed when the word money is even whispered, they hear it immediately. I had 2 friends, both homeless alcoholics. One only drank Listerine and slept in the dumpsters. Years later, I've met them. One is a manager of a store, a car, driver's license. The other also well off. So I asked them, what the hell happened? Detox, rehab, AA, 12-step program, New Year resolution, oath, promises? They said no. One day they woke up and it was all over. They wouldn't touch it even if you paid them. The reason I'm bringing this up is to see how awakening can hit anyone, anytime, anywhere. It's like falling in love more or less. Fear, this extraordinary jewel, can also trigger that. If we consider what spirituality is as a great inwardness, meaning to turn your attention inward, and that must be done constantly as awareness, which demands cooperation, sensitivity, and intelligence, then one may also go through great awakening. For some, a simple question may trigger that. Am I body who has a spirit, or I am a spirit who has a body? By turning attention inward, being still, in this way, and constant contemplation on it may also trigger that. So, some kind of input and effort must be required here, and for some just happens spontaneously. Who can really tell?
Some people are just very logically minded. They don't do well at having faith or at believing in gods, etc. It doesn't mean they can't be spiritual, but it might be in a very different way than someone who practices a certain religion. It's not no capacity whatsoever, but they don't tend to just believe in what's taught. If they can't see it, feel it, experience it themselves in a very physical way, then it's just not real to them. Magical thinking, as therapists call it, is something that people in some religions or forms of spirituality routinely do. Monotheists call it faith and prayer. Pagans call it belief and magic, but it's really not all that different. Magical thinking is something that people like atheists have a hard time, though, because when it comes to that, they're not real good at just believing and thinking like that. They need to see it, touch it, to believe in the reality of it. I have had to explain to more than one therapist that magical thinking and magical thinking are not necessarily the same thing. One is absolutely intentional and part of a religious belief system that is legitimate. The other is not. Paganism and psychiatry can be a hard mix sometimes. Therapists, many of them, they just don't get the whole witch thing. It's better than it was now that paganism has almost gone mainstream, but still a lot of old school shrinks, they get very confused and start labeling you things that don't necessarily apply if you talk to them about your magical practice. There is still prejudice there sometimes. People who think like witches/Wiccans, they are often dismissed as being mentally unsound when really it's all intentional roleplay and not really all that different than what monotheists do. Prayer is acceptable, but for some reason spell casting and petitioning a personal deity isn't. That's never made any sense to me. But that's how they are and how they think, how they are trained to think. Off work they may or may not have a religion, but their job is to be non-spiritual people when you're being shrinked and to put that label on you if they think magical thinking is a bad thing psychologically for you. I've run into quite a few mental health people that just cannot be spiritual in the same way as me or even understand how I'm doing my own thing that way. To them, what I do is illogical, childish, and magic simply doesn't make sense or exist in their reality. I've met two that get it and who understand that the mythology and the rituals, it's a conscious choice for pagans like me. It's not something delusional, it's intentional theater and role play and just a different kind of faith from the way most monotheists do spirituality. I was born with a very logical mind, but I also have an intense ability to visualize and to role play. My mind makes up stories easily and I can work with mythology to accomplish things I need to accomplish. It's all about creative vision for me. I'm very creative in general and artistic and not much of a follower. That's part of the reason that monotheism just doesn't work for me. I'm also very logical, so I don't do just believing in what I'm told well. That's something that monotheism requires sometimes. You can be both logical and creative and spiritual, but that is just very hard for some really literally minded and logical people.
My story: I grew up Christian, by choice, actually. When I was a teenager, I started thinking if God was real, He wouldn't have made my life such hell. So I became adamantly hardcore atheist. But around and after college, I slowly began becoming spiritual. I'm not 100% sure what it was, maybe partly psychedelic experiences, partly contemplation of the vastness of the universe. In my mid-20s, after being depressed literally my whole life, I was desperate for relief. And I found meditation and yoga, which led to a subsequent spiritual awakening. Since then, the presence of God is undeniable. I have experiences that confirm this frequently. My take: I think everyone has the capacity for spiritual experiences. We are all created from the same divine source, after all. But if you grow up religious, you may end up missing the point. Because church, to me, is just a bunch of words. God, though, cannot be described, and can only be felt. This is not emphasized in church in my experience. When you don't have positive experiences with God, then you may resent this. You become closed off. Or if you grow up atheist or not religious, then maybe you're already closed off. It's not to say people can't have spiritual experiences and be religious. But my point is, it is this being closed off that diminishes capacity to connect with God.